Hey everybody, sorry I couldn't be here today. Figured I'd go through the notes and have the sub show the video. So we're going to do notes on 5.2 constructors, and then you're going to do this day 28 cat class. Let's talk. So constructors, we went over this. I forget if it was unit 2 or unit 3, but we went over all this before. So this should come fairly easy for you. Constructors have no return type, and they have the same name as the class. So right in here, this is a very simple book class that just has two variables, the author and the title. And then here's a constructor. And by no return type, I mean, it doesn't say public string book or public void book. It just says public book. See, book, exactly the same name as the class. And a constructor can take one or more parameters or not, and then it sets up the variables to their default values. So if in another class, if this line executed, the constructor would be called, and it sends over the author and the book title, and we'd have an object called B1 that had this information in it. The variables passed in as parameters only exist inside the constructor. So in this case, the A and the T variable, you can't somewhere else in your class refer to A or T because they only exist right here. When somebody calls the constructor with a call like this, A for just a minute or millisecond is Murakami and B is 1Q84. And then later those variables are gone. So I recommend using things other than author and title. If your variables were author and title, you don't want to have your parameters be exactly the same thing. I mean, you can, and I'll show you in a second what happens, but it's better to use something similar but a little different. If you insist on using the exact same names as your variables, like right here, string author, string title, then you have to put a this in front of your local variables. And by local variables, I'm talking about these. So because the variable declared in the constructor takes precedence. So you can't just say author equals author. It wouldn't work. But you say this dot author, that means the author at the top level in this class should be equal to the author right here. And the title at the top level of the class should be equal to this title. So this is fine, but it can be confusing and easy to forget to put the this there. So, doing just an A and a T, is another way to do it. If you create a class and don't write a constructor, then Java automatically runs an invisible no argument constructor that just sets all the variables to default values. So integers get set to 0, doubles to 0.0, strings to null. So note, strings don't get set to empty, they get set to null. So here's an example. The battery class has a double charge level and a string brand. And if you created a battery object, like I do right here, battery B equals new battery, and then I printed it, you'd get brand equals brand colon null percent charge 0.0. And that's because there's no constructor. So it's a silly class. You'd want to have a constructor and, create battery objects that have brand names like Duracell or whatever. We learned about overloading with methods earlier and constructors. So here you go. You can, just reminding you, you can overload constructors. That means you can have multiple constructors with different parameters. So the order and type of the parameters is called the signature. So notice this, here's 3 person constructors in some fictitious person class. And this one just takes a single string, this takes a string and an int, and this takes a string and an int and a variable called color. And so these can all exist in a single class because they have a different signature. This is the signature. Now, here's an interesting question. Which of the constructors on the right would be allowable as a 4th constructor and why? So I'd say whoever is subbing, could you please pause the video and get people to think about this for a second before resuming. So pause the video. Okay, we're back. Item 1 here is not a valid 4th constructor because it has a string. I know this is string color and this said string n, but all Java cares about is that it's a single parameter that's a string. So 1 is right out. 2 is a string and an int, and we already have a string and an int. And as I just said, the names of the variables don't matter. It's the type of the variable that matters. And the third one here is an int string string, and that would be a fine fourth constructor to add if you needed to, because it's a different order. So int string string is definitely different from string int string. A word about toString methods. Most custom classes have a toString method, and it always starts like this: public string toString. The naming is very specific. Java looks for that when you try to print an object. And you don't print anything inside the toString. You return text that somebody else is going to print. So, for example, in the battery class, we had this toString: return brand plus the brand variable, and then a new line and percent charge. So somewhere else, somebody else does these calls. Battery B, new battery, print the battery. Okay, and Java prints the battery's info using this this toString. Now, if you didn't put a toString in your battery class, you'd get something like this: battery at, and then some hexadecimal number. And that's what happens when you don't have a toString. That's because Java wants to honor your request to print something, but it can't print it nicely because it doesn't know what you want. It's a custom class. So toStrings can have logic in them, like if statements and all kinds of things. I'd recommend take a look at the, now you could take a look at the toString inside the frog class and see what it does. It's similar to this. It creates an empty string and then puts enough periods, one for each hop, and then puts the little at symbol or the frog emoji at the end, and then returns it. So you can have all kinds of code in a toString, whatever's necessary, but at the very end, it has to have a return and a piece of text. So this logic returns, puts the word low charge into at the end of the battery if it's a low charge. So just a handy little help. And you could also do it like this: if it's less than 70, return low charge, and otherwise return regular. I was just in the other one trying not to repeat everything. That's it for today. So I'm having you do a cat class, and obviously a help video will already be posted. Good luck. I hope to be back soon.